everyone, thanks for joining me today. We are going to look at the Magnoliidae Clade today on Eileen Chevalier's Typewriter Alphabet Flashcards Botany series. Small but diverse, the Magnoliidae Clade includes magnolia, black pepper, nutmeg, avocados, and cinnamon. In this lesson, we'll look at what makes a Magnoliidae special. So the first thing you want to do is gather your materials. So in the read section today, in addition to your flashcards, which you always want to have, and today we're going to do magnolia. So get out your M card. So go ahead and heft out your natural history and Flora books from DK Smithsonian, both of those. And then once you have those, you can get your journal and we'll write out our definition for today. We are going to define Magnoliidae. It is a small but diverse clade branch of the Angiospermae division containing plants that usually have a pollen with a single pore and tepals like monocots, but often have two cotyledons and woody stems like the eudicots. So we've already studied the Monocotyledonae clade and the Eudicotyledonae clade, and now we are on the Magnoliidae, and they were not always considered a clade. This is a more recent development. But let's take a look at them, see how they compare to each of the other two. To me, it's really interesting. So you've got the basal angiospermae, and they are kind of on their own. They're really diverse. They're not super related to any other things. And then you have this really tiny Magnoliidae clade, which does have all these similarities, but they also have similarities to both monocots and eudicots. So really interesting. The first thing that we're going to do and question and investigate is to compare the images of the monocot and dicot stems in Flora. Then we're going to compare the trees of the three clades in the DK Natural History book and figure out which types of stem the monocot or the Magnoliidae might have. So the magnolia tree, let's just look at that one in particular because it's easy. They're really beautiful. They're very, very branched. In the monocots, the trees have these very long trunks and then lots of foliage at the top. Whereas eudicot trees are, here's a picture of a mangrove. It's a little small. Mostly they have close-ups in this book. So if you think of like a classic oak tree, it's like the climbing tree, right? So you can grab onto a branch and you can keep going up. I mean, obviously as they get older, it's harder, but cherry trees, any of these trees, they have branches that you can hold on to, put a swing on. There's no way you're ever going to be swinging on a palm tree. There's nowhere to put a swing. And climbing up it is hard because you have to hold on to that trunk the whole way. Instead of having all the branches. But the magnolia has all those branches all the way up. So let's look at our stem. All right. So here are the monocots and here are the eudicots. So what do you think? Because I haven't ever seen one of these, so I am not giving you the answer. But I believe that it's going to have the same internal structure as a eudicot because the way that it looks and it functions like a eudicot. And since it used to be part of the dicots, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like the structure of monocot trees is so different than any of the eudicots, and the Magnoliidae are like them and similar in that way. So the magnolia, the second question, magnolia flowers are encased before opening, just like the eudicots. However, the outer structure is a bract instead of a sepal. So compare the emergence of new magnolia leaves with new magnolia buds. What's similar Are the leaf coverings sepals or bracts? What happens to these plant parts after the leaves and flowers emerge? Okay, so this is a little difficult if you do not live where magnolia trees grow, but I find it really fascinating, and I'll show you some video that I took of the tiny little beginnings of the covering of the leaves, and it looks so similar to the coverings of the flowers. So they are all encased, right, before they come out. So generally, like if you have a eudicot flower, then they're going to be covered before they open, and the sepals are always on the outside and they're protecting the bud. But here in the Magnoliidae, there's a bract, and not only is there a bract just on the flower, there's a bract on the leaf. So the video is actually the bract that's covering the leaf. And as the leaves underneath emerge, then the bract actually just falls off because it's not needed anymore. I find that with plants, they produce the parts of the plant that they need when they need them, and when they no longer need that plant part, then they stop feeding that part of the plant, and then it just falls off. So you'll see this later on in flowers. As the different parts of the flower are needed, then they're nourished, and when they are not needed anymore, the nourishment stops going to them, and so they wither and just fall off. Third question, compare the cone of a conifer to the seed pod of the magnolia. How are they similar and how are they different? So the seed pod of a magnolia kind of has a cone shape, like that of a pine cone. And the way that the seeds are kind of stuck in there is reminiscent of that cone, right? They both have that cone shape. They both have lots of little seeds all around them. However, they're obviously not even in the same division, not in the same phylum, if you want to use that terminology. So this is why the magnolias get called like the ancient trees, or primitive trees, because they are so they're more similar to non-angiospermae. So here is the flora, so beautiful. So it shows you over here there are the early flower buds right there, and then right here is the open one. Now so we talked about how the stems are similar to eudicots, but let's look at the flower itself and think about what that's similar to. Is that more similar to a monocot or to a eudicot? And if you look at it, there are 3 right here, and then there are 3 right below that, and it continues. So instead of the 4, 5, like a eudicot, you have them in 3s, and in fact, just like we saw on the 5 card, every one of those is called a tepal. So they are not petals and sepals. Like that doesn't happen. It has that little hairy protective bract that covers it up. But underneath that, all of what would be petals and what would be sepals, they look exactly the same. They're all that beautiful white, really thick leaves. I mean, petals, they're amazing. Not petals, they're tepals, because they're so similar. You cannot tell the difference between the sepals and the petals. So we just call them all tepals, and they do have those groups of 3. So the flower of a magnolia, if you were just to look at the flower itself, you would say, absolutely, that's a monocot. I mean, no question, right? Like everything's in groups of 3s. It has tepals. But then when you look at the trunk and the way that the structure of the stem is, it's just like a eudicot, right? And then you look and you're like, okay, well, it has, like, what does the seed itself look like? And because it has it's so similar to the monocots, it can't be classified as a eudicot, right? So it has to go into this new group because it is not similar enough and it doesn't conform to those true eudicots, okay? So that is why it's in a completely different clade. All right, so on to your journal. The first one is you probably have many Magnoliidae products in your home. Go on a hunt to find examples of Magnoliidae, monocot, and eudicot products. See what you can find. Lang Lang is another popular Magnoliidae. So Lang Lang isn't like something that we kind of have. Usually it's like an essential oil. So if your parents, probably your mom, uses essential oils, you're likely to find Lang Lang among them. And that is a Magnoliidae rather than a monocot or eudicot. So just kind of document those. I think it's fun to see, like, I find that the Magnoliidae are one of the most surprising, like especially with the spices, with the nutmeg and the pepper and the cinnamon. Those are so common. Like we use those all the time. But yet it's such a teeny tiny group, but it's very prominent in our spices that we use. The other journal activity that you can do, this is actually more of like a little project. So germinate avocado seeds and document the process. Create a log where you record how long you soak the pits the day they split, if you do that part, the day a root first appears, and then record the root and stem lengths daily. You may want to set aside a few pages for this. So I do this all the time, and it's so fun. So what I do, I'll show you, I'll just actually cut to some footage that I did of that process and show you how I potted them up and kind of what they look like once they've been in a pot for a while. It's a really fun process, but it's also, I always go, like how long did that take? Like, do they all take the same amount of time? And you can try getting different kinds of avocados at the store and see. Like recently I cut into an avocado and it came out just huge. It already had tons of roots on it and it already had 3 stems coming up. Currently it's in a pot and each of the 3 stems is producing little branches. So it's already starting to branch. It's only this big. It's absolutely phenomenal. Try it for yourself. It's a really easy way because you don't have to have a lot of dirt at first. So you just water. You just stick the toothpicks in, put it in water. They don't all work, so I suggest if you to enhance your chances, like try some different avocados, do at least 3 or 4, and if they don't work right away, then don't worry about it. Try it again. Don't feel bad. A lot of mine don't split. If you know the tricks, let me know, because I would love to know the trick to getting them to split, and maybe we'll get really lucky and cut into an avocado and see the seed in all its glorious development already. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Have fun with those journal activities, and I will see you next time. Bye.